I'm back with another leather-bound rebinding of The Lord of the Rings. This time I did things a little bit differently and I completely tore the book apart and resewed it with its signatures. So I started with this 50th anniversary hardcover edition of The Lord of the Rings. I tore each signature apart and removed all the glue and thread carefully, and then I resewed it back together. This is a really thick book, so this was quite a long process. I decided to use red as my theme color for this rebind, so I actually used red thread to resew it. I like using colored thread. I think it just adds another little neat touch to a book because you can see it in the center of the signature sometimes when you open up the book. So I did that on purpose. So I resewed all of the signatures back together. I used a French link stitch for this. It just gave it a little bit more stability, which I liked. This is a huge book, so I really wanted it to open really well when it was done. My stitching on this one was pretty messy because I was using pre-existing holes in the signatures. I did have to kind of adjust them sometimes and poke new ones, just depending on how well the holes held together after my ripping the book apart. So I have quite a few extra knots and pieces of thread on the back of the spine here. You don't see it when the book is finished, but that's why my stitching looks pretty messy. I'm also just not the neatest at doing stitching to begin with, so it's usually a little bit messy. Glue the spine together. I didn't glue the tapes yet because I'm going to round and back this book. I don't have proper backing press or backing boards or anything like that, so I just did the best that I could, and it worked out pretty well. But I rounded the book and let that dry, and then it was time to go in and finish my cover design. I'm using Adobe Illustrator on my iPad to do this. So I wanted a little bit of a 3D effect on the mountains here, so I cut them out of a piece of thinner chipboard so that they are kind of embossed. And then I picked out my end paper. So this is my collection of end papers that I have marbled. I decided to go with gold, because I was going to do gold foiling on the cover anyways. So I glued them on and trimmed them to size. Once everything was rounded and backed, it's time to glue the text block for real. So now I did glue over the entire text block and all of the tapes, and I lined the spine with mull. And then it was time to sew on the end bands, and I did this after I put the mull on the spine, just for a little bit more support with the sewing. And then once the headbands were all sewed on and glued together, I lined the spine again with a piece of craft paper for some extra support. And I just glued this on really, really well and pressed it in place with my bone folder. And then I moved on to the front cover. So I cut out all of these letters from chipboard. I did this by hand. When I do projects like this, it really makes me want a laser cutter, but I don't have one of those yet. And then I built the base for the spine. So I had never done one of these spines before, so I did watch a lot of tutorials and read some articles on it, but I also kind of made it up as I go along, which is what I usually end up doing. But I used the paper as kind of a template to help hold the leather of the spine and the front pieces in place. make sure everything was lined up properly. And then I went in and did the embossing around these letters on the front piece. This took a really long time. I wanted to be very meticulous around my letters so that they had really good definition. This leather is very thin and very supple and soft, so it worked really well for doing this. I had cut a notch into the chipboard on the other side so that the leather would be flush, so that I'm not ending up with a super thick cover at the hinge. So that's what I'm gluing this into here so that it folds around. And then I painted the letters with this pretty red paint that I had, and it looked really nice on the black leather. It almost perfectly color matches with the leather that I used for the spine as well. And I think it looks really nice in the finished product. For the spine, I was going to do some gold foiling. I have a hot foil pen that is an attachment for my silhouette. I also have a handheld one that I used for some of the details around the mountains on the front of the book. For doing this, I just had to make sure it was really lined up properly on my cutting mat so that when I went to foil, it would end up perfectly centered in the spine. So I did a lot of measuring and readjusting and then taped it into place really, really well before letting it do its hot foiling. This hot foiling pen works really well. I'm always impressed by how well it works whenever I use it. I cleaned that up a little bit, and then it was time to finish up the text block. So I glued all my tapes and my maul down now and to get ready for the casing in process. Case is pretty much finished, so it's time to glue it all together. I had never done a bind like this before with the 3 pieces, so it was a bit of a learning process, but I think it worked out pretty good in the end. To do the casing in. I used way too much glue on this front page. I don't know what I was thinking. So I had a lot of extra squeezing out around the edges that I had to clean up, and then I really had to make sure that this dried nice and flat so that that glue didn't soak into everything else. So now time for some pictures of the finished product. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. It was fun to do a different technique. And it was also fun to completely tear the book apart and start from scratch. It's really satisfying seeing how well this book opens, nice and flat. And I just think it looks so nice. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you like it. Let me know what you think.